All right. So welcome everybody to our Do More with Data live show. I'm glad to have you here. I'm here with Data Dave, or Dave McMorrin as he's known in the real world, and myself, Marc Decker, or Manufacturing Marc for this show. Today we're going to talk about the history of data collection, and going to kind of reminisce a little bit about our times back in the 90s, the 2000s, and onward. We're going to talk a little bit about how data collection has changed, and the challenges that we saw in our past, and kind of how it's shaping up to today, and where we think it's going to go. So hopefully it's an enjoyable topic, and as always, you can submit your questions, or you can submit other topics that you'd like us to cover in future episodes. So really excited to have the interaction from our audiences as well. So, all right. So Dave, how's it going this week? How you been?
Oh, hi, I'm Dave.
Oh, there you go.
Right
This
there.
is a trademark
for my friend Hina out there.
Yes, the trademark moniker.
So, what was the? I'm sorry, Mark. What was
I
the
just
question?
wondered how you were, but it sounds like you're doing okay.
Oh, I'm doing well. Doing good.
Maybe too good.
So exciting stuff happening in the industry right now. So
yeah,
a lot of fun.
A lot
of fun to be had. So how are you?
Yeah. I'm good. I'm excited to be here again. Really enjoy doing this show. I think it's fun. You and I get to chit chat, meet some interesting people, talk about stuff in the industry, things that we're seeing, and opinions. I think today's gonna be fun. A little trip down memory lane about our experiences. So that should be a fun time.
Sounds good. I feel like we should have the big hair wigs on. The hair bands reminiscent of the '90s.
Yeah,
going.
that would have been a good.
Should have done that. Future episodes.
Future episodes. We'll have to allocate some budget for that. That'd be good.
Right.
All right. So you've been in this industry for a long time. And I know you've got some great stories, and we always chat as we work together and stuff. But you've always talked about the field bus wars in the '90s, and maybe that'd be a good place to start with. How it started from your perspective. In the '90s, where you were entering the workforce, and kind of just takes back to how you saw the data collection kind of evolving then.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. So, I started in my career in manufacturing in 1990. So that's when I graduated college and started there. And working in computers. You didn't even have a computer on your desk, just to kind of give you a frame of reference on that. You were still doing work on AS400s and those kind of things, which you're going to talk about later. But when I started getting into controls, Ethernet was not a thing in the manufacturing floor. It was still RS-232 and 485 type of communication. So, if you did have a PLC, it was something that had limited connectivity. And usually when people were talking about connectivity back then, was not necessarily collect data. It was more about the field buses that we had. So everybody, when communication started becoming a thing, I guess it was more about field buses. So things like Rockwell had, Allen Bradley had their DeviceNet or Data Highway Plus even before that. And DeviceNet came out. Siemens had Profibus. Like Mitsubishi had, I think it was still called CC Link back then. It might have been something else. There was Modbus RTU. There was all these serial-based communications, and really the idea on the field buses were to communicate from device to device, right? It was really a way to lower the wiring costs. So instead of having to wire a VFD and wire back your start, stop, speed, all of those things, let's just add that to a field bus, and then I can communicate from the PLC to that device and drop the wiring, way down. And the reason I bring that up is because I still get people today that want to, can you read, DeviceNet data, and it's like, wait, that's the wrong, it's the wrong reason to do that. That is a device to device PLC type of communication, not a data collection type of protocol. Not to say you can't do it. It's just not really what it was designed for. to do it that way. So really, if you look at, I'll pick Rockwell, Alan Bradley, they had a DF1 protocol, which was serial based, but so DeviceNet would be from the PLC to a device. But if you wanted a SCADA system to talk to it, you would go through the DF1 RS2. It was basically an RS-232 protocol on that, which, and that was the same, Siemens had the similar thing. Everybody had the same kind of thing. I mean, I remember even, every company had their own field bus protocol, the field bus wars, who's going to win. I remember Honeywell had an SDS protocol, which I think was based on DeviceNet, and DeviceNet was based on CAN bus because CAN chips are really inexpensive because they're used in cars.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just, kind of how it evolved, and it, due to costs and what other industries were using to do this, to do this communication. And I do, but the problem with that is, okay, my PLC has a serial port, great. How do I get my serial port to my SCADA? Well, RS-232 can only be 100 meters or so. It's not very far.
A lot of limitations back then. And I think that was the, like, I think what was interesting was, like, from my side of things, I was in the controls side of things, but from an IT side of the house, we had mainframes, and we had the controllers, the old IBM 3174 controllers that sat all over the shop floor with coax that was running everywhere in the terminals, right? And we'd serve up data, and we'd read some data from some control systems just for some production counts or things of that nature. But if you ever actually wanted to get data out that wasn't already pre-canned, it was expensive, for one, because you'd have to store it somewhere in DASD, the good old days, and that cost money, a lot of money.
On your 40 meg hard drive that you had on your laptop and your x86.
Well, we didn't have laptops in those days. Right? It was like, let's spin it up on the DASD, and if we got space, we got space, but if we don't have space, then we're not going to save it, right? And that was, we didn't, I don't think we knew any better, right? It was already exciting. Like when I walked in a year later than you in '91, and it was mainframe city in the GM plants, right? And they were local mainframes, and it was running the plant, and it was there. It was fascinating stuff, but there was no concept of combining data. It was just run the plant, make cars, get them off the line, tell the operators what part went next. A lot of the QA checks were all manual. It was all the old clipboard days, where they'd have sheets of paper. They had forms, pre-printed forms that would go to a printer and come back, and we'd have voice of the customer sheets that people would fill out, and then we would do some data entry maybe into a system as it evolved, but very, very manual and not much technical other than the very, very basics, right? And so looking back to comparing it now, like how did we get to where we are today, where it's so ubiquitous? And I think where I saw it start to change was as servers, like the IBM and the Dell servers, the HP servers started to pop out in the early 2000s, right? Where the shift went from the mainframes to more accessible, I guess. It was similar but the same, right? Similar but different, where you'd have these local servers, and each server was basically running a different plant app, right? But now there was more ways to actually get the data out of the shop floor. I think Kepler did a great job at revolutionizing, how we could actually access the data. And then we started to see some more powerful SCADA, right, sit on top of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you mentioned Kepware, and Kepware, because the Kepware is based on the OPC Foundation, OPC-DA spec. So just in a generic sense, OPC-DA, right? Because there's more than just Kepware out there that does that.
Yeah.
I mean, that spec came out in, what was it? I think 96, 94, somewhere in there. So, mid 90s, let's call it. It was still serial based. Like Ethernet was not on a PLC.
Yeah, exactly right. It
Like
was all serial
you
based
might have
stuff.
been able to, yeah, you might have been able to get a card that was like a 10 base 2, kind of network coax, like we talked about the other day, the coax cable,
The coax
Ethernet. You
cable.
might have been able to get that, but for the most
But
part, it was still
yeah,
serial based.
yeah, because we were using like Novell NetWare for certain things, right? To get some data out, but I'm a little foggy. I'm trying to think exactly how that played into it, but yeah, the Ethernet stuff that was the big breakthrough. I think
Yeah,
later,
that's
right?
memory is the first thing to go, Mark. That's the first thing.
I know. What's the second? Like I can't remember the
I
first
don't
anymore.
remember. Yeah, I mean one comment, like we got off the field bus wars. One comment, a story that I vividly remember. I was in Detroit at a trade show, and I was in a booth, and somebody came by, and we started talking about different field buses and all those kinds of things. So I think it was like 1999, I want to say, and somebody came to me and it's like, well, who do you think is going to win the field bus wars? And my response was, they
Yeah,
already
who'd you
lost
pick?
and they don't know
Oh.
it. He's like, what do you mean? I said, Ethernet is going to win the field bus wars, and just the other people just don't realize it. And, it did, right? If you look at it now, Ethernet is common on a PLC, right?
Yes.
It's almost harder to find one without it,
We found a
than that.
few, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could get some really low cost ones that don't have
Yeah.
it, but for the most part, anybody that's running a factory is using some
Yeah, they're gonna hook it
higher
up.
end ones that have Ethernet, built into it. What I didn't expect was all they did was they shift the same proprietary protocol from a proprietary cable and connector to an Ethernet cable and connector with a proprietary protocol, right? So
Yes.
so they still held on to that a little bit.
Well, I think the
Um,
war was the same. It just moved to a slightly different battlefield.
right,
Right. They
right.
just moved the protocols up one layer in the stack.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So, but that does lead into the whole Ethernet, and all of a sudden Ethernet being, because there was a lot of pushback. I remember back in the 90s, early 2000s, that people were just pushing back on Ethernet. It wasn't deterministic, which it still isn't, but it wasn't stable. They didn't understand it. What's an IP address? Those kinds of things. So I think there was a lot of resistance, which is typical in manufacturing, right?
Any
Resistance to change
change,
is
yes.
always
Any
a
change
big thing.
always
Yeah.
gets the backs up of certain people. And yeah, I think the adopters of it, or the people who realize, like, there's obviously risk with change, but if you can mitigate that, or at least avoid that risk, and try to go for what's coming rather than stuck in the past, has always been, I always advocate for that, right? Like,
Right.
your
Right.
control
But
risk is usually nicer.
yeah, but I remember there was that transition period, from my side, from the OT side, and you open up an electrical cabinet and seeing a Linksys commercial, like from Best Buy, you know, zip tied to the side of the panel to be their Ethernet switch, because industrial switches didn't really exist, or they were incredibly expensive to get. Right now,
They
you can get them for slightly more expensive than, you can get a DIN rail mount 24-volt DC power supply switch for a little bit more than what you get paid for a regular at home switch. Right.
Yeah, I remember those days where the network was always an interesting thing, where you tried to control it, but then it kind of got sprawly, if that's a word. I'm not sure if that's a word, but I'm going to
It is
coin it.
now.
It is now. We use it. Um, yeah, because I remember too, when we started getting these, I'll go back to the servers, but what I think began the silo data approach was, as at least back in the day, you could only run one thing on a server, right? So each server had its own app. So we had monitoring and control systems, or SCADA systems, right? And then we had electronic pull systems, and we had SPC systems, and we had quality track and trace systems, and then we had part control systems, and each system sat on its own server, right? And so by definition, each system then had its own database, it had its own front end, it had its own user interface, and again, getting information consolidated there wasn't cloud storage. There was you could buy hard disks, still a little bit expensive, but you'd have to then set up a database, and then you have to then write different interfaces to all your different databases that were on those individual systems. So like the pain that you had to go through to try to mix and match data across those systems, it was incredible, right? And most people didn't do that. So they focused on their individual system. And then this is where I think the rise of shadow IT, or the origins of it, where people realized that they could get a little bit of data themselves out of each of the systems and maybe piecemeal it across and see what was going on in a holistic way. And that's where, because a server was easier to access than a mainframe, it was a little bit more freer. And there was no cost associated to it. Like if you access a mainframe, those cycles typically cost you money, right? Your time sharing options and things like that. So you're paying for every interaction. So companies were very tight with who could access it and what you would be accessing, so they weren't paying a fortune to, if there's a central mainframe. So with the servers, I think the data started to become a bit more freer, but still locked into the silos across the different types of systems. And I know at GM, again, we had very, very specific systems for very, very specific work processes on the shop floor. There's no cross breeding, I guess you would say.
Yeah. That's so basically the silos of data that still continue to this day are basically just reminiscent of what it was like in the 90s and early 2000s, right?
Yeah, the good old days. Oh. No, but I think
and then when everybody started getting a laptop, right, or a PC at their desk, loading up Microsoft Excel, for example, that became the tool of choice, and still is today, in my opinion.
Still is today. Lotus 1, 2, 3 missed out. They could have been the tool of choice, but they I don't know when they backed out of that race.
Right. I mean, like how many controls guys or plant guys out there, or plant people out there that are like experts at VBA, in Excel and writing Visual Basic code to do some transformation on some data from 3 different systems to try to get a report done.
Yeah, their CV is like, I can write ladder logic and VBA. That's it.
Right, that's it.
Made a career of that. Nothing else I need.
And honestly, I go out and talk to plants, and like it hasn't really changed all that much a lot of times. So
no, it is quite similar. I agree.
Yeah. But I mean, what I also like, okay, so yeah, PLCs and robots and all the devices now have, sensors have gotten smart, right? So I can get data from a sensor directly, and I don't have to go through some, PLC. But so I have access to a lot more data, right? And then the technologies out there are making it easier for me to get to the data on it, right? So yeah, and a lot of that, I think, is like you talked about before, is I'm putting a Wi-Fi in my home, I'm putting internet into my home. I'm not afraid of it anymore. I know what an IP address is, and those kinds of things. So I think that's really helped accelerate some of that stuff with what we can do today.
I think you're right, because again, as you moved into the 2000s, especially like on your desk at work, you now had a desktop sitting there, right? And so you had email, and you had, if you were fortunate, you're probably using something like Outlook. I'm trying to think of the Lotus Notes.
Lotus Notes.
If you're unfortunate, you were using that, because I found that quite painful. And if you're really unfortunate, you had to use both. What's that?
Slander.
Well, it was good, but it felt difficult.
It was.
Back then.
I remember those days.
Yes. So I think where people, again, they got introduced to the tech at work, and they became more comfortable with using their own keyboard. Like again, in the 90s, you might use a terminal, but you probably wouldn't. You'd be looking at it maybe, but the tech wasn't embedded in your day-to-day, right? And I think you're right. As soon as it starts to appear in your office, and you're using that as part of your day-to-day, and then exactly what you said, when it gets into your home, your private life, then it's becoming like, I get it. I can use this PC for all sorts of stuff, and then
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and I
Because
think
I used to think that it would be like automation in a factory would then push itself into the commercial. Through my career, long career here, I realize it's the other way around. It's like it happens at home first, then goes into the manufacturing space. Right.
yeah,
Like I get used to it at home, and then it's like, because now you get the questions of like, why can't I get all this data that I want in one place right now on my phone? Because I can do that with all these other things. I can get a car. I can order anything ever invented on the planet, dropped off at my door today.
yes,
So why is this so hard?
yes, and that's yeah. I think that's what drives the change
Yeah.
is I can get it at home. You know, I want it at work.
Yeah, and it cost me $50. Why is it so hard at work? Right.
Exactly, exactly. And then I think because again the shadow IT then starts to come in where I know how to do it now, right? Because I'm comfortable and I know I'm not going to break anything. So
Yeah.
I've got the courage to go do it because I've got the experience that's, it's
Right.
not a skill. Like back in the day, you go on a course to learn Windows 3.1, right?
Right.
No one does that anymore. You just learn it. It's like it's a natural acquisition of the skills for most people where you watch a YouTube video, you do some hands-on, but it's intrinsic into your life, right?
Yeah. And like the YouTube video of the 90s would have been, if you're lucky, they sent you a VHS tape, to go watch
Yes,
something.
yes. Which 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 wasn't rewound.
Right. Be kind. Rewind, please.
Darn
Come
it.
on. Yeah, it
Yeah.
really has changed. And the other part of it, you just kind of mentioned the courses is, you start talking about IT. Well, now you can go get a you can go get a degree in IT basically, or CS and networking. So the education part has also helped that to be more, you know, um, proficient at it, and, throughout the industry and all the industries. So I think that's really helped change this whole thing. Um,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
really, attitudes have changed pretty quickly, I think, in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. And you one that really I think I like your opinion on this, but the whole cloud thing, right? I remember even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if you said cloud in a plant, you were escorted out the door, right? Because
Right. There's
not
still
going to
some plants
happen.
like that.
Yeah, but now because in my opinion, because Google and Microsoft and AWS offer cloud storage to people at home, right? So you can store your photos or whatever you got going, or you listen to your music from the cloud, like Alexa's hooking up to
Yeah.
a music library there, and it's in your personal life. I know how to save a file to my Google Drive or my OneDrive. It's natural, right? I don't have home storage much anymore. I just use the cloud because it's that easy. It's backed up and it works. And I
Yeah.
think that's the next piece I saw go into the manufacturing again, where people realize it's actually not as bad as they thought.
Yeah, I remember reading an article, I think it was from Bill Gates or Microsoft in general, and they're talking about hey, we don't want to install the program on your computer. We're gonna host it somewhere else. And cloud wasn't a word back then. It was like, okay,
Yeah,
we'll just host it, and you'll go. And internet was just starting out, so it was a brand new thing. Um, and it was still slow. It's through a modem, with the dial-up tone and all that stuff. And I thought of it, I'm like, it didn't make sense to me at first. Like, what are you talking about? But then I thought about it, and I was like, oh, I get it. Because now, if you have your software in the cloud, so Microsoft Office, we'll just pick that because everyone, lots of people use that,
right.
right? We're gonna host it in what's called the cloud now. They host it in their data center. So, and all the storage happens there, right? So the storage is there, the application's there, all the data is there. So what do I need for my laptop? My laptop is basically now an internet browser. I don't need a hard drive. I don't need that. And that's basically what the Chromebook ended up being, is basically that. It's a little more than that now. I get it. But
Yeah,
so it's like, it hasn't completely gone that route, but it got pretty close to it. And the other thing would be like, okay, now I don't have to go buy a suite of products and install it and then keep upgrading over time. Now I can just go get the latest stuff and pay as I go, right? It's more of a utility now,
When I
right?
need
So
it, yes.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I think that whole mindset's also changed. It's helped, change it from a CapEx expense, in a manufacturing CapEx to OpEx, right?
Yeah.
That it's, and, depending on the accounting and like, well, we can't depreciate it now, but that's not my area of expertise on that. But yeah, it's interesting how real life, or what we do in our everyday lives at home is then going into the office and happening that way. I want to kind of circle back a little bit to the
Yeah.
communication protocols, right? After the field bus wars, I'd like to talk about like the evolution of communication from PLCs, if that'd be okay.
That would be wonderful.
Great. So, OPC-DA, it relied on Windows because it relied on DCOM, not to get too nerdy on you.
Right. Thank you.
But, so the, OPC Foundation saw that kind of limitation. So they came up with the OPC-UA spec that came out in, I think, 2008 or so. We're starting to see, or I'm starting to see a lot more of the OPC-UA type of protocols out there, but still, it's not everywhere. It's still an add-on. It's not native, right? You can't just go buy a PLC and it has OPC-UA out of the box typically. Like there's a
Right.
couple, there's a handful, but most of them, you still need something to convert the old protocol into an OPC-UA. So that's one of them. But I also look at things like, message brokers, MQTT being very popular in industrial space, but I'm also looking at things like Kafka, NATS,
Mhm.
AMQP. There's all these other message brokers that are out there that have really kind of changed the game and how we're accessing the data and getting it, the democratized data that's out there. So it's been interesting to see the kind of evolution of, going from serial or field bus data to serial data to Ethernet based data to now a much more open standard to get the data, which is, I think, accelerated the usage of data, right?
Yes, I would
So
agree.
it's
Yeah.
like now it's give me more data, and it's getting easier to get that. And so it's interesting to watch that whole path. I don't know what you've seen in that space.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's the journey from, there was data, but it had a very specific function, like to do a specific part of a build process or a specific quality check. And then it's evolved into very specific applications, but now it's becoming like data is a very broad thing. So people and businesses have realized that the data is it's an entire layer across the production process, and it all fits together in some way. And when you can find the connections, they lead you to interesting results, right?
Yeah.
That you didn't expect. And part of the magic of where we are now, which is an incredible place, is you can get data from anything. Now, maybe you don't think
Your
you need it.
toaster.
Well, yeah, which could be interesting, but I, you know, don't think I would need that. Um, but you could, if you wanted to, you could get data from all these different things, and if you put it together in the right way, you're going to find something interesting, right? And it may or may not help you with your production process, but it will give you a better understanding of what's going on, which is going to lead you to ask another question,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And like if I had data for my toaster, I might ask the question, why do I have data for my toaster?
Valid question.
The valid question,
But
right?
and I think it's like a it's a geometric acceleration. It's like, okay, here's one piece of data for you,
Yes.
right? That one piece of data is like, hey, can I get 4 pieces of data? Hey, can I get 16 pieces? Like it just, when you learn off that first piece of data, right? That's going to then ask a question of what, I want more data to explain why this piece of data. So example, why is my machine, machine's running or not running, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. I know it's not running and running or not running. That's valuable because I can be reactionary and go figure out why. But would also the next question be like, okay, let's get more data to find out why it's not running. Was there an alarm? Did the operator hit the stop button? Is it a lunch break? What it is? So there's more data they want. And then, okay, there's an alarm. Okay, why is this alarm? What alarms are happening? What's causing this machine to be down? So there's the 16 pieces of data, right?
Yes.
And it just kind of accelerates into that. And eventually where people end up, or what I've been seeing, is people are saying, okay, I want a data model or a digital twin or whatever term you want to use, put all this data together and land it in a place that I can go query. And then somebody with, some BI tool can then go look at all that data, tie everything together, like what part was I running, what was the machine doing, what operator was on it, what time, what shift it was, like all that information is now together that you can really get some really valuable insights,
Yeah,
into the data.
and what again, where the magic comes from is just because I look at a piece of data doesn't mean I understand that data. But when you put the context around it, you can share that data out. Maybe I do understand it, but if I share that out to different people with the right context, you've just expanded the analysis from your little world to a broader sense of what's going on here. And there's pretty smart people out there who are going to make good connections based on the data that you can now share as well that you wouldn't even have thought of, right? Because of your little paradigm, right? So
yeah. And then, so the plant person generates a report, and then the quality person is like, "Hey, where'd you get that report? Where'd you get that data?" And then he's like, "I got it from here." And then you're sending more data. That's why I say it accelerates, because it's not just the amount of data; it's who wants it, and they want different data.
They want different, or they're going to ask a question about that data that maybe the plant person would never have thought to ask, and then that drives the next thing, right? So I think that's where it is. So
yeah, it's like I say this all the time to people. It's a journey, right? You're not going to get all the data you want and the right way at the right time. Yeah, it's going to be an evolution of it. You're going to keep reiterating, and you should, right? If you're going to try to get better, like continuous improvement, right? The first word is continuous, right? So you're constantly looking for more data, more information to improve your process.
Yeah, and that goes back to the old adage we always say is start small. You just need one piece of data to start, because that's going to lead you in who knows what direction, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, just pick something. Start with a piece of data, and then ask questions. Like with my.
It's just amazing. We started this conversation, from 30 years ago and what was going on, and like what I've seen in my career. And I still have some time in my career too. So who knows what's going to happen in the future. But to see where we were, which was really hard, really difficult, costly to get data, to now, I can't get enough data kind of thing. And we're getting so much more information with machine learning and all the other technologies that are out there. It's just amazing to watch this all happen.
It is.
From when I started.
Yes, I'm glad I picked this industry. I had doubts at the beginning, but
and weekly I still have doubts. But
sometimes I wake up screaming in the middle of the night. But so
understandable.
It's understandable. So I'm thinking about my toaster though, because I had some ideas for data for my toaster, so I don't have to stand by it watching it. If I could have a timer to my watch or something, then I could go do something else while my toast burns.
There you go. Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Seriously, we got a new oven, and it has Wi-Fi, and my wife connected it all up, so I get an alert on the phone that she's preheating it. So it's like texting her, "Hey, what's for dinner? What are you making?"
Cool.
Usually I'm cooking, but so it's always interesting to see that. But the nice thing is, like, why would I want this? Like, well, I can be at work or at the office and preheat the oven before I get home, kind of thing. So there's some advantages to it, I guess. But yeah, I just, in a general sense, getting data, there's so much more data, so much accessible data on the factory floor now, and it's not expensive. It's easier to get to. I don't want to say it's easy. It's easier.
It's accessible, right? You can get it, right? If you do the right things, you can get it.
Yeah,
So,
it's not a week-long task to get a little bit of information out. It's an hour, or less kind of information to get the data. So
yeah, I agree.
okay,
All right, Dave, I think we've meandered on this subject for a while. Maybe we should wrap it up for
sounds
people.
good.
Hopefully they're
Well,
still
enjoy the
listening.
yeah. It was interesting to hear your perspective on the mainframes. I was never on that side of the company when I was starting my career, so it was interesting to hear what you dealt with. Right, that
Yeah,
was
it was interesting because mainframes are very special things. Uh,
yeah.
and
I just remember the first time having coax run through the office. Like, what's this? Like,
what's
it's the
this?
internet.
Yes.
It's the Ethernet. What is that? It's
What's that?
communication. All right, why?
Nice. Why? Exactly. Why? Right? It was
What?
it was
I've
the
been doing it this
question.
way for 5 years. Why do I need that?
I'll
So,
do that. So,
all right.
all right. Well, any last words, Dave, before we wrap this up?
Nope. I just really enjoy these conversations with you, Mark. Looking forward to the future ones. So join us every couple of weeks. We'll try to do it every couple of weeks anyway, and have
Yeah,
a new
that'd be good.
topic. And
Yep.
if anybody has any topical questions out there from a couple of old guys being in this industry, be happy to talk about that, and we'll promote it on our LinkedIn or our website at litmus.io and talk about what topics we'll be talking about next time. So enjoyed the conversation, Mark. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a couple of old guys. I know there's one I'm looking at, but I can't find. I don't see the other
Okay,
one.
tough. Okay, all right, gotcha.
All right.
You're not far
Thanks,
behind me,
everybody.
pal.
Yeah, yeah,
All
yeah.
right, take care.